I'm Paul Hunt, and I'm from Bradford, Vermont. And the story of my involvement in Parish Players is actually a rather roundabout story. I'm one of those people who did not get into theater until I was in my 50s. Like a number of other people have said, I did it when I was in high school, and that was the end of it. And I got involved up in Bradford with Old Church Theater because I saw a transaction ad on the back page of the Valley News for casting, and I decided, why not? And I would give that a try. At that time, the Old Church Theater was being run by two elderly women, and some of us tried to push a closer cooperation with Parish Players, and if I'm not telling tales out of school, that was not looked upon fondly by the two women that ran Old Church Theater. They didn't like Parish Players. They felt, I don't know if they felt inferior to Parish Players or rejected by Parish Players, but they didn't like it. And whenever anybody brought up the idea of, well, we could at least be able to, borrow lighting equipment and lend, no, they didn't want to do anything like that. Well, in 2004, that all changed when they retired from the theater and we got a board going. And as soon as we got a board going, we said, we really need to do more with Parish Players. And Sheila was already down here and being on the board, Sheila Kaplow. And so then we started a policy of trying to have people who would be on both boards and encourage people to come down here. And I hooked up with Neil McGlathery to exchange lighting, and when they needed something that they would call me at Old Church Theater. When I needed something, I would call Neil. And that all started to work out very well. The first thing that happened was that Dean Whitlock cast me in one of his murder mysteries that he was putting on out at the Lake Maury Resort. And it wasn't an official Parish Players production, but it was all Parish Players people. And it was a script that had been written by Dean. And that went pretty well, and I really enjoyed that. And as a result, I came here and I auditioned for the Tens. And I was offered a part for a script that I had not been terribly enamored with. And I asked several of my friends, really, should I do this? This does not sound very interesting. And Sheila Kaplow was one of the ones who said, yeah, you should do it. The Tens is really nice. This happened to be the third Tens that was put on here. And so I did it, and I had a wonderful time. And the play was very well received, and I really enjoyed it. That fall, and this was back in 2009, I was cast here in The Odd Couple, and I've got a couple of vignettes from The Odd Couple that we can talk about a little later. And since then, I've always been involved in the Tens in one way or another. I've co-produced the Tens, I've directed for the Tens, I've acted in the Tens, and I can't say enough about the Tens. For me, at least, the idea of spending that much time in rehearsal on one particular scene, if you will, of less than 10 minutes in length, it's like an intense acting lesson. You really get to develop your character. You get to really develop the kind of depth that you don't get when you do a full-length play. And I have found that to be extremely valuable. And I always try to to get involved in the Tens when I can. In fact, The Odd Couple is the only full-length show that I've done here, although I've done a couple of composite shows, which were several small plays together. A couple of the funny stories. One of the stories was when doing The Odd Couple, a great deal of the play was staged around a poker table, which was set out in a thrust mode. It was forward of the proscenium. And so we were right out there, right facing the audience. And a lot of the humor centered around food. And the fact that Oscar kept complaining that we were here to play cards, not to eat food and not to discuss Felix's problems and so forth. And it was actually a fairly difficult scene to stage because some of our actors really felt the need to concentrate on lines, but we had to put all of the rest of this stuff into it. You had to have the shuffling of the cards, and the dealing of the cards, and the throwing away discards, and the betting of the chips, all of which had to go on extemporaneously while you're making sure that you stay in sync with the lines that you're doing. Well, at one point, somebody brought out a bag of chips. I'm sure it was probably Felix, who was serving more food as he was wont to do. And it was a bag that was very difficult to open. And one of the actors was just terribly struggling with the bag. And all of a sudden, the bag burst. And we had a blizzard of Ripple potato chips, some of which went into the audience, much of which landed on the table and all over the actors. And it was, the audience really enjoyed that scene. But it wasn't the only food episode that was interesting. There was one which was particularly interesting to me because at one point my line was to ask one of the other actors if he was going to eat the pickle, and he said no, if I wanted it I could have it. Well, you know, it's your pickle. And Oscar comes along and he says, we're here to play cards, not to eat or discuss food or whatever that line was, and he smacks the plate. And it was always fun to see where the pickle went, because sometimes it went out and landed on somebody's lap in the audience. It could land most anywhere. Well, one night the pickle went straight up in the air and it landed on my cards, which were face down on the table in front of me. And I didn't hesitate. I looked at it and I said, what would Murray do? And Murray, of course, would eat anything that came anywhere near him. And so I picked up the pickle and I ate it. And several of my friends in the audience afterwards said, I didn't think you liked pickles. And my response was, you're absolutely right. I loathe pickles. I haven't had a pickle in 40 years. But that's what Murray would do, would be eat the pickle. And I said, did I look like I enjoyed it? And they said, yes, you did. I said, well, then I did what Murray should have done. I did a good job as an actor. I made you believe that I enjoyed that pickle. And I told the other actors afterwards, I said, please don't ever let that pickle land in front of me again, no matter what you have to do. Parish Blues Players has had a website for long before I came on board, but it wasn't really being kept up to date. It was more just a mishmash of, you know, we'd put a new show up and let the previous information flow down further down the homepage, and I don't think that there was any real effort being made by the board to concern themselves with what was going on that. And finally, we got a few members on the board who started to think about the fact that, gee, you know, people are becoming more digital and people are looking there. They're not looking in the yellow pages anymore. They may not even be looking in the Valley News anymore. They're looking online for what's going on, and maybe we should do something a little bit more professionally with our website. And at that point, I took it over, and we completely redid the website at that point, and we tried to make it if you forgive the common term, you know, the home page, it becomes the home site for parish players. That it may not be where we do the most of our advertising or our outreach, but it's where you come because all the information is there that you need. There's the map there for how to find it. There's the reservations page. There's a list of all the shows which are coming up. There's the list of the characters if we're doing auditions. There's the calendar. It becomes a central repository for everything that we want people to be able to find in this digital age about parish players. And so, you know, we started to do that, and that process has been going on now for probably at least 5 or 6 years. And lately, we've had to come to terms with the fact that more and more people are expecting more from our website. They're expecting us to do more, and the board has come to that conclusion when they started to see statistics that showed that 50% of accesses these days are on mobile devices. They aren't even on desktop devices anymore. And so several members of the board, including yourself, Mandy, got involved in this process, and we went through another iteration whereby we said, okay, it's time to redesign again, and let's have a newer, more modern look than what we had. And let's start to do more things than we have done in the past. For example, taking online reservations, which is a process that we just started within, the past year. And our own statistics now show that more than 50% of our people make their reservations on the website rather than through the phone, which I thought was a pretty quick uptake of that kind of a change, because those folks are used to calling in. They've been calling in for 50 years to make reservations, and yet within less than a year's time, 50% migrated to the web. And now, of course, we face other challenges, and that's the fact that we need to look at how do we integrate the information that we pull in over the web with what we keep as a database on people, including their interests and their mailing addresses and their snail mails and their phones and so forth. How do we integrate that together? How do we do a better job of meeting their reservation needs? But also, how do we bring that into a better format for the mobile world? As I mentioned before, over 50% now are accessing, not so much when they're researching, but when they are trying to do just some simple, quick task, such as make reservations. It's very apt to be from their mobile device, and so that has to be handled differently. And we've just started talking about doing a photo gallery. We have an excellent collection of photos from past year's performances going way back. Most of them are not digitized. And the photo gallery that we have on the website goes back 6-7 years at least, and it really isn't suitable for modern devices. It doesn't work well on mobile and so forth. And so that's one of the things that we're going to be addressing right now. Is I did a little research on what works best to work on a desktop device, but B, also on a mobile device, and C, that makes it easy for many people in the organization to be able to upload pictures and tag them and so forth without having to send it all to the webmaster and have one central person who's responsible for all that. And it turns out that there are actually very few products out there that will do that. And we did find one which is nice. It handles desktop, but when you put it on a mobile device without any change on the part of the webmaster, all of a sudden you can swipe left and swipe right and do slideshows and so forth. So we're coming along. We're certainly not on the cutting edge of it, but for community theaters, we're pretty far along. And as you say, it's really hard to look out, because it's easy enough to say, well, a year or two from now, it's going to look very much like it's going to, like it looks now. And 5 years, it won't be too terribly different. But when you get out 10, 15 years and you get that hockey stick curve, then you're looking at vast changes. So it's very hard to say, where's that going to go? But one of the things that has not been done well by small organizations, especially ones which are run by volunteers, is how do you integrate it all together? How do you make it so that you not only have that home website where people can find everything, but how do you also make sure that the information is getting out there on Facebook, the information is getting out there on Twitter, the information is getting out there to people that you want to be involved or to simply be knowledgeable about what you're doing. And that gets into a very basic concept of how do you get your information in front of people. And while a website is a great repository for information, and I think those will always be there, a website is something that you expect people to come to you and to see what's on your website, as opposed to Twitter, Facebook, even traditional advertising like radio and TV, or mailing lists, whereby you push your information out in front of people. And I think that that's something that a lot of organizations don't do terribly well. A lot of companies don't even do that terribly well. They're sitting back there hoping that people will come to see the wonderful website they have, but they're not doing the job of getting the information in front of people and making them want to come to that website, and as an adjunct to that, wanting to come to the physical brick and mortar site that we have. Parish Players traditionally has had a website which contains a lot of the essential information about who we are and what we do, but a website as a standalone operation expects people to come to us and to see our website. And so we need to do more in terms of pushing our information out there and getting that information in front of our audience, our clients, anybody who we feel needs to know more about Parish Players. And there are a number of ways in which we can do that, and I don't think we're doing it nearly well enough yet. We need to do it through venues like YouTube, where we put out short snippets of shows, including things like getting permission from the authors to be able to actually put out some of our performances of their 10-minute pieces. We need to have people who are more involved in getting our information out on Facebook on a very regular basis. We need to get involved in the Twitter world, because the people who are coming along, the ones behind us, that's where they're going for their information, and they often don't expect to have to find out where our website is. They expect that information to show up in front of them because someone has shared that information with them. So we've got a lot of work to do on that end, and just making sure that we are sharing who we are and what we do, so that people then want to come. And people say, that looks like fun, that looks interesting, I want to go there, I want to participate, I want to do whatever. This, to me, has always been a very different place from being, say, at Old Church Theater in Bradford. And I don't know why the difference, but this has always been more of a community place than any other theater that I've worked in. We do more in terms of getting together for, be it after parties or the carry-in meal that we do at the annual meeting, or work days that we do here. We have an awful lot of people who come here because this is where a lot of their friends are, and this is where their interest is. And when they come to be part of this community, and they're not in a rush to leave. They're not in I've been here an hour working on the gardening outside, I've got to go. They want to hang around. They want to be with the friends, the people that they enjoy within this community. I find that the people here in general work together very, very well, and I find that an awful lot of them, the other people in this organization, they truly are their friends, even if they only see them once or twice a year. And that's kind of special here. I've got one other little piece to share, which is just another vignette, was that first murder mystery that I did with Dean Whitlock at the Lake Maury Inn. He cast me as a state police investigator, who was the guy who was supposedly there to investigate the murder. And it was a great shtick. Now, Dean had written the script for this murder mystery, as much as there is a script for a murder mystery. And he had settled on what I thought was an excellent idea, and that was having the police investigator, who then would investigate not only the other actors and question them as murder suspects, but also the audience who was there to participate in the weekend. They were technically suspects as well. And so they would be brought into this little room where ostensibly the idea was to question them about their possible involvement. But what it really was a way for me as the state police investigator to get critical information out to the audience that they needed to make this murder mystery move along, and to have timed releases of information to them. It was a great way to do it. I credit Dean with having thought of that or copied it from somewhere or wherever he got the idea. It was a wonderful way to do it. But it was also so much emblematic of Vermont and of being in a rural area, because I was expected to dress kind of in business attire as a state police detective, but I was also expected to be armed. Well, we didn't have any good prop guns that would work for that, and I didn't own anything that would work for that. And so I went to see Dennis McClure, who at the time was the Orange County Sheriff. And I asked him, I need things like handcuffs and so forth. And then he says, oh, sure. He says, here's a holster, and here's handcuffs. And oh, by the way, if you want to carry my off-duty pistol, you may carry that as well. And so I did. I carried his off-duty pistol on my hip for the entire run of that. And then when we brought it here to Parish Players on stage, we did the same thing. I went and borrowed the pistol again, and I carried it on stage, which was a real law enforcement pistol, not loaded, of course, but other than that. And there's so many venues where you couldn't do that these days, but here in Vermont and here in Thetford and Fairleigh and with the Orange County Sheriff, oh sure, not a problem. And in fact, I see Dan, who's looking in the door. Dan was in that very first, not first murder mystery, but that particular murder mystery. And I very fondly remember Dan, who played several different roles in that show, and several different genders and sexual orientations as well.
He dreams this stuff up all the time. He's like spreading scandalous sorts of rumors about me, and gender identity crises and things like that.